On this episode of Bytes and Banter, we are joined by Dan Turchin. He's the co-founder and CEO of PeopleReign. He has numerous roles in his past in startups and different AI, ML focused roles, product roles. He's worked for ServiceNow. Dan, how are you doing today?
Rocky, it's good to be here. Never been better.
I'm excited to have you on. I think in our industry, there's not many people we get to talk to that have quite the vast experience that you have. And so, for those in our listening group, those who tune into this episode of Bytes and Banter, Dan, can you just kind of introduce the audience to who you are? Right? What's been your journey? What is your current role at PeopleReign? What are you doing? I know you're a startup, almost a connoisseur, right? You advise startups. Kind of talk a little bit about who Dan is.
The way I like to say it, I'm broken for ever doing anything else with my life, but this is a lifetime passion. PeopleReign's the seventh company that I've started or helped start in and around the field of applying AI machine learning to improving work life. And Rocky, I say my why, the reason I was put on this planet is to help 1 billion employees have a better experience at work. I firmly believe that every employee deserves to feel trusted and valued and respected, and that believe it or not, this might seem like heresy, but there's a world of work that is frictionless. And this also might seem like heresy, but I believe the quickest path to delivering delightful experiences at work is with technology. And I don't find it ironic one bit that we can use the principles of AI, artificial intelligence, to really bring back humanness to work. My journey got started about 30 years ago. I started my first company called AeroPrize. My lead investor later called it the long road to an overnight success. About a decade later, we got acquired by, at the time, one of the big four in systems management. I know, Rocky, you go back a lot of years. I know a recent guest you had, Tony North, goes back a lot of years. Mutual friend Terry goes back a lot of years in this space. But roll back the clock a couple decades, and there was BMC, CA, IBM, and HP. AeroPrize got acquired by BMC. My next company ended up getting absorbed into ServiceNow, which was a startup at the time. Went on to pursue this passion that I had going back to the 90s, and here we are today at PeopleReign, able to really bring to fruition a vision that a number of us had a long time ago, but lifelong passion, really trying to help deliver experiences at work that bring out the best of every employee.
That's a very audacious mission, right? I want to help 1 billion people. Uh, how did you come up with that? Like, what was the catalyst in your life? What happened that made you realize, man, this is really my goal. This is what I want to strive for? Because you don't talk to people every day who say, man, I want to help anybody, more or less, 1 billion people who, that's a lofty goal, definitely when it comes to work and the complexities of different industries. What made you decide that that's what you're going to strive for?
So I graduate from college, and I'm a fresh-faced industrial engineer, newly minted, and I go to work at the Walt Disney Company. And I love that company, and I love that job. And I had like just an infinite capacity of energy and enthusiasm and passion for doing the things that I was being paid to do, designing experiences in the theme parks that would really make magical lifetime memories. I took that goal so seriously. And after a short while, my frustration was that there was so much friction at work that I felt like the company was, paying a tax for all of the administrative work, the compliance work, the forms I needed to fill out. This was in the 90s. There were a lot of forms. We didn't have cell phones. We had pagers back then. And I realized that if I could get back that time that I spent just doing compliance work, and I were to multiply that, call it a productivity dividend, times every one of my colleagues at Walt Disney, and then, heck, every employee of a large enterprise around the globe, you quickly get into the billions. And so I decided, conservatively speaking, when I left Disney, that I was put on the planet to help 1 billion employees have a better experience than what I was having at Walt Disney, because I feel like work is no longer a four-letter word. When you just get to do the thing that you love, the thing that every one of us feels like we were put on the planet to do, And if we can do that unconstrained, gosh, I mean that's a world not just of work, but that's a world that I want my kids to inherit from me. And I believe that when everyone's doing the best work of their lives, any problem that we choose to tackle, any problem, not work related, not a no capitalist manifesto, whether it's curing cancer or solving the climate crisis or ending world hunger. If we all focus on doing the work that we love and solving problems that we feel like we were meant to solve when we arrived on the planet, then I feel like if I can contribute even a sliver and help a billion people, then I'm all in.
Man. So you've had a just cause, right? That's what Simon Sinek calls it for a very long time. It's kind of been driving your decisions and everything you do. And I've heard you talk about using technology to humanize work, right? When you use, and I think this is something you said when we were kind of talking ahead of this episode, when you use AI and machine learning, you take the friction out of work, you create work people love to do. When you talk about friction, what do you mean? What does friction look like in an environment? Different industries might look different, but in general, what does that word mean when you talk about it? And how does AI, machine learning, how do we use that to remove that friction? How do you know when you're in that pinnacle of no friction, right? I've removed it. I'm doing what I love. Walk me through that. What do you mean by that?
Here's a simple litmus test. You and I get up in the morning and we look at our calendar for the day. And there's some stuff where you like kind of do an eye roll. You're like, oh man, I gotta do that thing. Like that one's gonna suck energy from me. And then there are other things where you look at your calendar and you're like, awesome. Today is awesome because I get to do that thing. Frictionless work means you get up in the morning and everything on your calendar is things that you derive energy from. And there's nothing that saps your energy. That's the world of work we're trying to create for everyone.
How close are we?
There are different ways to answer that question, Rocky. Um, there's the existential question, about humanity and our objectives, and we've got to delve into a little bit of the philosophy of the mind, and perhaps that's for version 2 of this conversation. And then there's the more pragmatic answer to the question. We can use the power of data to identify where all these friction points are, and we can use the power of AI, mostly more classical machine learning, to identify the ways to extract each friction point. And so, even though it can quickly delve into, philosophy and all kinds of deeper topics, if we just think about how to get the things that sap energy off the calendar, it looks like anticipating what I'm going to need when I'm traveling. I'm based in Northern California. Right now, I'm talking to you from San Diego. And wouldn't it be nice if we had, kind of, we each got the world's best personal assistant that was kind of there to anticipate your needs. So I make sure that my cat card gets me into the building when I arrive, and my laptop is configured to get on Wi-Fi, and the meeting room is large enough for the people who are attending my meeting. These are things that generate friction, and they are completely items or source of friction that can be eliminated with a little bit of data, a little bit of smart AI, and an empathy first or human first approach to building technology. That's well within our reach. That's now we're talking, not existential, not end of century. We're talking about 12 to 18 months away.
I That timeline is crazy to me. And transparently, this is gonna might throw you for a loop, but I did some digging, if you will, because I was just curious, right? Dan Turchin's background, 30 years, you've seen a lot in the AI space, and I actually listened to a short 10-minute interview you did. It was 7 years ago, and 7 years ago is what?
Depends if you're living dog years or not.
Right, right. It's a long time ago in the world of technology. And I think they titled the interview something around like overcoming fear in AI, right? And you actually talked about in the idea of AI and machine learning for virtual agents and auto mapping and auto routing, and then you kind of segued to this concept that honestly 7 years ago was very, very novel in mining publicly and privately available data to drive machine learning, which most of our listeners, if you're familiar with the world we live in now, would call that Gen AI. 7 years ago. And it just blew my brain when I'm like, this Dan was talking about Gen AI before Gen AI had had been tokenized, right? That title, that generative AI. And so I'm curious to hear, as you've seen, right, this what I think a lot of people know as prescriptive AI kind of being transitioned to a Gen AI hype cycle. What are you seeing as the potential risks, benefits of everything going on, right? So you have security, you have, in a lot of industries, I think you have a lot of consumers using AI now that have never used AI before. And you have organizations that have to bridge that gap and meet that need and meet that expectation. But from your where you sit, right? Are we overhyping this Gen AI concept, right? Is it going to be too expensive? Is it going to really change how we work? Or, walk me through what you've seen, because 7 years ago, whether you realize it or not, I don't know if you remember that interview, Dan, you were talking about Gen AI before it had any sort of phrase or tokenized word. So I'm just curious to hear you unpack that, right? Prescriptive to Gen AI to, like, where we sit today. Is the hype real? Is it really 18 months away from seeing like, just walk me through that. Where does your brain go?
So interestingly, when I recorded that interview in 2017, it was right around the time when the seminal paper was published by Google researchers that introduced the world to the transformer model, which led to large language models. But at the time, the vision was effectively no different. We just had very blunt objects. So in order to achieve the kind of conversational fluency, what I was talking about in the interview, we relied on knowledge graphs or semantic parsing, which is basically constructing. We didn't have vector databases, and we certainly didn't have the sophisticated kinds of word embeddings that we can use today to build LLMs. But we did have the concept of being able to map language patterns in n-dimensional space. And so we could actually build kind of crude early versions of language models, but very domain specific. So back then, the idea was you could use publicly available data to understand broad language patterns, and then you could use domain specific data, like in the field of employee service, for example. You could have AI or neural net uh, trained on all of the patterns that exist in, let's say, a corpus of trouble tickets or HR cases. And you could achieve in a narrow domain decent, it was 2017, not exceptional, but decent intent detection. So you could have AI agents using natural language processing, NLP, do language tasks and take actions, which is the prescriptive AI versus generative AI that you mentioned. Now, you asked a question about the risks. I believe as a technology community, not just going back to 2017, but I don't know, maybe going back 100 years. We as a community have become very, very adept at answering the question, what could go right? Because it's kind of what we do. We get excited about changing the world with technology. But I believe that now we're equally obligated as technology leaders to become comfortable asking the question, what could go wrong? And we're right on the cusp with some of the emergent properties of LLMs of really having to get good at answering the question that you asked. So three risks concern me the most. I host a podcast called AI in the Future of Work. That's kind of my passion project. And we've published about 300 conversations. We have a community of about 1 million listeners. And I have this really unfair advantage that I'm in like the catbird seat because every week people who are like my role models, like my heroes, come and hang out with me. And so I get to ask them that question. And so when you ask it to me, I want you to know I'm channeling kind of the amalgamated wisdom of a bunch of people who I truly admire and who are really pioneers in the space. So one, health and safety. So we need to understand that LLMs, based on the way they're trained, they're bags of words. And as we all know now, they are good at predicting the next word in a sentence using tokens. And it turns out what they're really, really good at is perfectly replicating human bias. And so if you go out and let's just take ChatGPT as an example, and you hoover up everything on the web, including everything in the darkest recesses of subreddit forums, You know what? It turns out there's a lot of hateful stuff that goes on out there. And all we're going to do is just hoover that into a large language model and train the AI to go ahead and do some things and say some things that we don't agree with. So we need to acknowledge how this technology was delivered or developed, how it's consumed, and really be very responsible, be very intentional about putting in place the right guardrails. Number two, so because these LLMs are thirsty for data, they're going to continue to hoover up your data. And the adverse consequence of that is they'll hoover up data that you want them to see, and they'll hoover up data that you don't want them to see. And so it quickly devolves into a conversation about ethics and who's responsible when, let's say, the LLM exposes data that it was never supposed to have seen. There's too much plausible deniability going on. The data collector says, "Hey, it was in the public domain. It was out there for me to take." And the owner of the data says, "Well, I didn't know it was out there. It certainly wasn't intended for you to use to train a large language model." So we need to be very aware of what the unintended consequences might be. And then three, and perhaps most important, is we want to make sure that as we introduce more, we call it agentic behavior. There's kind of this spectrum of this idea that we give the AI agent a task to do, and it may spawn groups of bots where it delegates subtasks out to these groups of task-specific AI agents. And what we need to understand is that as we give very, very well-intentioned tasks articulated using natural language, and the AI agents, with the benefit of these large bags of words that they understand, might go out and do things that maybe are fair, but bastardized versions of what we thought they would do. The most extreme example, which I don't believe we should take this too literally, but you tell an AI agent, your job is to cure cancer. Well, one hysterical interpretation of what the AI agent would do is kill all the humans, because if there were no humans, there'd be no cancer. So let's not go and extrapolate from that one too much. But three major concerns that I think as technologists we need to be comfortable, in a kind of quasi role as an ethicist as we think through the implications of what this technology could do if things went wrong.
That was a very full answer, Dan.
It was a full question.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about your podcast, right? Because I think you mentioned all these minds and the people you get to talk to about this very thing, right? The benefits, the risks. How do we lead through this transformation? And you said you just hit 300, right? Episodes, not including the episodes you've been on that aren't your own, right? um, it out of curiosity, in those 300 episodes, what are the themes that you see echoing with people who are talking, right, about this transformation in the world we're in the future that we're really stepping into? What are those themes that you consistently hear over and over and over again?
Chair of the future of work at Singularity University, good friend, been on the podcast multiple times, guy named Gary Bowles, has a very interesting concept about the future of work that he talks about. He believes that the future of organizations will be ad hoc teams brought together based on combinations of skills, not titles or roles, or geographies even. And what a team will be is an ad hoc grouping of experts that each bring to a meeting or a team or an ad hoc organization just the thing that they do best, that they love doing. And I've thought a lot about the way Gary Bowles describes that future of organizations, and I really do believe when we talk about a friction-free work environment, if all day long you were surrounded by people who are experts at the thing that they were in the meeting or being paid to do, wow, just think about being inspired by everyone that's around you. Like just that collective energy is just pure magic. So that's one that I think is a recurring. That came from Gary Bowles, but it's a recurring theme. Baba Kojat is one of the co-inventors of Siri. He's now the CTO of AI for an organization called Cognizant. And Babak on the podcast, he wrote a book about it, but he talks about the risks and the benefits as well, but what it means to have to imbue AI with sentience, and some of how we need to unpack the term sentient and not assign it to AI lightly. AI does not experience the world like we do. Bag of words, right? Bag of words. And so, Rocky, you and I go outside and we smell the flowers and we feel the heat on our skin, and we touch other humans, and we have so many sources of sensory input, and we need to appreciate that no AI that's just good at generating the next word in a sentence could be considered sentient. So that's something that I felt like Bobak did a good job of articulating, and lots of other insights like that. But I think those are two that top of mind stand out.
Man, I think I'm trying to imagine a world where AI can experience what a waffle fry tastes like, right? Like, and to hear my girls laugh, and I think it's such a good point because so many people have this. I would say it's a valid, but really almost an ignorant fear of AI, right? This concept of like, oh, it's gonna take over this iRobot, right? Concept of AI, or uh, in reality, AI is always gonna be as valuable as it is helpful, right? Um, in my world, right, I like to talk to potential clients and existing clients and my team about if technology isn't serving human needs, it's a waste of technology, right? Like any vendors that can't bridge a gap for humans and are trying to sell technology aren't going to be in the industry very long, because AI is there to support humans. And it, and maybe keep me honest here. In one of your episodes, is it one of your episodes, or is it just something that you contributed to? This idea of the employee experience manifesto that feels familiar, and I can't remember exactly if it was one of your episodes or if it was just something you contributed to. You talked about.
It was 2022 when we introduced that through PeopleReign. It was not through the podcast, but yeah, me and the team were just thinking about the implications of what it was that we're developing, and we take serious as a heart attack our responsibility of exercising AI responsibly. And so we always think, every line of code we write, every feature we spec, we're always thinking about whose life is this going to improve. And if we don't have a suitable answer, then we're not building the right thing. One of our mantras is don't solve problems. So there are a lot of problems that the world needs to have solved, and we're just arrogant enough to think that we can solve some of the pretty hairy ones. But there are amazing ingenious people that are solving problems already that we don't need to solve again. So we're always thinking about what can we do to eliminate friction at work. And so this idea came about that you know every employee deserves to take a manifesto or sign a pledge essentially, along with their employers, that says I deserve to be respected and feel like my time is valued, and I deserve to feel trusted at work. And that became kind of the bedrock of how we're building PeopleReign. Is can we, at the end of the day, can we look back and say, we did good work today because we exercise what little power we have to make that manifesto that we believe every employee should take and have it be honored by their employer. If we did work that was consistent with that, then we're on the right track.
I love that. And I think when you talk about a world where everybody's passionate about what they're doing and they get to show up for that thing, and I feel like I've only got to talk to you a couple times, and I love that every time we've talked, Dan, that shines, right? It's clear, like your mission is consistently shining through, whether or not you're vocalizing it. It's tied directly to what you're about and you're passionate about, and I love that. So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, what does PeopleReign do, right? Like, you don't need to give me a sales pitch, but in general, right, what's the friction they're removing, right? This is your baby, right? It's one of seven, six of them you're no longer with. PeopleReign, your new baby that you're seeing grow, and you're trying to create this culture and add value to organizations. How are you doing that?
Yeah, when I describe the vision and the mission of PeopleReign, it seems kind of maybe even like quasi-academic. PeopleReign is like the most applied use of AI imaginable. So we genuinely, everything I've shared, we share this vision, common purpose, very very much a values focused culture. What we do actually is we deliver on the promise of the future of work with 5 AI first applications built on one uniform, what we call a system of intelligence. And we believe that The future enterprise stack looks like a system of intelligence that figures out what work needs to be done and then goes and does the work. And it sits on top of or augments a traditional system of record. The system of record being your HCM, your human capital management system, your ITSM, your IT service management system, your ERP, et cetera. So those systems of record capture artifacts associated with the work that the system of intelligence did. But there should be kind of an independent layer of the stack that is doing the automated action taking, the intent detection, the troubleshooting, the diagnostics, the action taking, reset the password, book the travel, book the conference room. And so what PeopleReign did is we actually built that system of intelligence. And it's 5 applications. One is called Experience. It measures and manages the overall engagement levels quantitatively using a science-backed methodology of how employees are doing. There's the virtual agent, which uses natural language processing to interactively diagnose and resolve issues. There's Classify, which if the virtual agent isn't sufficient, Classify uses classical machine learning to be able to fill in the value of any field in any form in any application. Usually it's used for auto routing. There's Recommend, which is a live coaching tool. So when PeopleReign needs to escalate the request to a human, Recommend essentially makes that live human an expert by providing a stream of live coaching next best actions. And then there's Insights, which uses anomaly detection to detect patterns in service trends or service issues that indicate what action can be taken proactively to reduce service disruptions that haven't happened yet. So 5 AI first applications that automate the end-to-end lifecycle of the employee service.
I have so many questions that we don't have time for on this episode. I think, one thing that I've seen a gap in this whole Gen AI hype, right, is Gen AI, Copilot, ChatGPT, wherever you want to go and point to Gen AI, for me has replaced Google. Like, I mean, but what I found is it doesn't do the executables very well, right? The things you're talking about, the go do that because I can ask it a question and get a really good answer, but I don't always have an outcome of it being able to accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish, which it sounds like from an employee experience perspective, that's your guys' focus is doing those things, right? And so super exciting stuff to hear. Yeah, I think for sake of time, Dan, I do want to, before I ask you a final send off question, I do want to ask, is there anything else that you feel like, right, our audience of IT leaders, IT support analysts, IT managers, right, and those who are just in general curious about people's stories, anything else you would offer before I ask you our send off question in terms of wisdom, insight, just thoughts for our audience?
Anything that can be predicted is better left to machines, but anything that requires rational judgment or empathy is better left to humans. So I believe we're entering a new era in terms of what it means to be a leader. And increasingly, you might have thought that you were a help desk supervisor. You're not. You're a psychologist and you're an ethicist. And when you come to work, just know that your team members are looking to you as a leader to help them understand, will my job be here next month, next quarter, next year? And that degree that I have on the wall, I thought that meant that I was an expert and that I had unique skills. And it turns out, my colleague is now a bot, and that bot is smarter than me at the stuff that I thought only I could do. So what does that mean just to human psychology? And just know that as a leader, having these soft skills and being able to coach team members through these conversations is going to be more important than being able to patch the Active Directory server or something like that. That was the traditional role of IT. That's what I'd say is ahead. And when I say ahead, I mean we're taping this in August. I mean like September and October.
I love that. I love that. I think, whether it was Kirk Weisler or Patricia Sobera or, all of the episodes we've had, human and the human elements and human leadership and that empathy and continue to be just a permeating, notion that everybody keeps pointing to that humans are going to be needed and the human elements of what it means to be human are going to be even more important in leadership. So I think that's so good. I'm definitely going to clip that and quote it on LinkedIn, Dan, and I will give you credit. But that is such a quotable, important component of the future of work and the future of leadership. So let me ask you the final question. I did prepare you for this. And I'm real interested to hear what you have to say because you've been through so many organizations and so many startups and seen so much. If you could turn back time and meet younger Dan, what advice, what wisdom would you tell younger Dan for him to take forward into this his own future?
I have two girls, 14 and 16, two high school girls. And so the advice that I would give the younger version of me is the advice that I try to give them. Not that I always took the advice when I was their age, but I hope they do a better job than I did. Find your passion. Pick something that you love, that you will do anything in the world to see it succeed. And an exercise that we did, me and my girls, when they were babies, probably maybe 4 and 6, something like that, is we took a shovel into the backyard, and I had them at 4 and 6. They could barely write, but they had to write a list of everything that anyone has ever told them they couldn't do. You're a girl, you can't play sports. You're too short, you can't run fast enough. You'll never be able to you'll never be the best writer, or you'll never be able to sing on Broadway. The world can be very good at crushing your soul, and it can start young. And so what we did is we took those lists of what the world tells you can't do, we dug a hole in the ground and we buried the can'ts. And I never did that exercise, but if I had to roll back the clock to when I was that age, I would have done that. And we haven't yet had to unbury the can'ts because those girls know that they're buried. They're buried permanently. So find a passion, bury the can'ts. 2 lessons I would have given myself.
Man, as a dad of two girls, that just resonates so heavy with me. Dan, we're definitely going to have you on again, and if you're open to it, I think you welcome conversations, and I appreciate you're a busy guy. I appreciate your time today. Thank you for being with us. Real quick, where can people find you, and any plugs you have that they can come see the wisdom you have to offer, your podcast, etc.
Rocky, you're great at this. You ask good questions. I really enjoyed this, and of course, I will come back anytime I'm invited. I'm an extended member of the HCI family, so yeah, please invite me back. I'd love to continue the conversation. PeopleReign, like the reign of a king or queen. People REIGN.io, and certainly on socials. Fairly active on LinkedIn. The podcast is called AI and the Future of Work. Get it wherever you get your podcasts: Apple, Spotify, etc. And anyone who's listening and is similarly passionate about these topics, the future of work, the future of technology, I would love to hear what's on your mind.
Thank you so much for being with us, Dan. We'll catch you on the next episode of Bites and Banter.
Looking forward to it, Rock. Thanks.